Hello everyone, and welcome to the channel. I'm DarkCaseX. A 21-year-old female college dropout falls in love with a wanted fugitive. They move in together after 2 months. After 4 months, they commit a serious crime. In the end, both are arrested. Her boyfriend pulled the trigger, but she became the main culprit, sentenced to 110 years in prison. However, 8 years later, she successfully escaped from prison, becoming a nationally wanted fugitive and a household name overnight. When this woman, called the most manipulative woman, was imprisoned again, her story took a major turn. Countless people pleaded her case, and even the original prosecutor deeply regretted it, lamenting the injustice of the verdict. So what exactly happened back then? Let's travel back to the year 2000 in Indiana, USA, to re-examine the causes and consequences of this case. When you mention Indiana, you might think of its long history. According to legend, the state's first inhabitants, Native Americans, had already settled here as early as 8000 BC, at the end of the Paleo-Indian period. Today, it has grown into the 17th most populous state in the U.S. It has also performed well in economic growth, ranking among the top U.S. states in 2021. The state's capital city, Indianapolis, is even more diversified, known as the Crossroads of America, racing capital of the world, and so on. The case we're discussing today originated here. It's worth mentioning that the Indiana Women's Prison was the first adult female correctional facility in the U.S. Adding to that, 90 kilometers to the west is Indiana's largest state women's prison, Wrongfully Correctional Facility. These two places have significant ties to the protagonist of this case. The protagonist, Sarah Pender, was born in May 1979 in Indiana. Her family background was decent. In the eyes of her relatives, she was a well-behaved and sensible good girl. In 1997, at 18, she graduated from Lawrence Central High School and was accepted into one of America's top public universities, Purdue University. It's said that because she was not mature enough to handle the dual pressures of academics and life, just 1 year later, Sarah dropped out. She found a secretarial job just to get by. In June 2000, at a concert, Sarah met Richard Hall. He was a bar bouncer and had been a football player in high school. Although he was poor, he was very muscular and had a good physique. Sarah fell with this athletic man who made her feel secure. The two began dating. It was precisely because Hall was poor that Sarah felt a sense of satisfaction from being needed. Hall needed a place to live, so Sarah rented a house. Hall needed transportation, so Sarah bought a car. In short, whatever Hall needed, Sarah would try her best to provide it. Just like that, the two needed each other and fulfilled each other's needs. In less than 2 months, they moved in together. The place they lived together was a 2-bedroom house. They lived with a married couple, 24-year-old Andrew Cataldi and 25-year-old Tricia Nordman. This couple was not good news. One made and sold counterfeits. The other sold contraband. Both were fugitives from a Nevada correctional facility. In fact, Hull was not as simple as he appeared either. He was also a fugitive from the law. Just counting his recorded misdemeanors and felonies, there were 8 in total. Hull and the couple he lived with hit it off immediately. Inside the rental house, they partnered up to trade in contraband. They even wanted to expand their operation, building a production lab in the basement. As for Sarah, who was in love, after learning what Hull was doing, she didn't report him to the police. Instead, she chose to follow her man.
When I found out that he dealt drugs, that I accepted it because I didn't want to lose him. I went into the relationship with my eyes open. However, I was very, very naive, and I never thought that it would bring harm to me or anyone that I loved. And like most women, I thought that I could change him. And I asked him to stop selling drugs and to get a real job, and he agreed. And that was the path that I thought we were going on at the time.
On October 25, 2000, at 6 p.m., a resident was taking out the trash when in the dumpster, he discovered the bodies of a man and a woman. Terrified, he hurriedly called the police. Police investigating the scene found both victims died from the same model of firearm. After checking the victims, fingerprints, and other ID info, the police quickly identified the deceased. They were the fugitive couple, Andrew and Tricia. They lived nearby. After getting their address from neighbors, the detective in charge of the case, Kenneth Martins and others, arrived at the rental house the next day. The place was already empty. The house was very tidy, with obvious signs of being cleaned. However, there were still bloodstains in multiple places. DNA testing confirmed they belonged to the victims. The police deduced this rental house was the primary crime scene. A neighbor revealed that the victim's roommate, Hull, had, on the afternoon of the 25th, borrowed a plug for some cleaning equipment from him, saying he needed to go back and clean up. At this point, the police determined that this man named Hull was a person of significant interest. The police quickly tracked the movements of Hull and his girlfriend Sarah. It turned out that the day after the victims were found, Hull took Sarah to a friend's house in Noblesville. They allegedly went to return a pickup truck. The police went to Noblesville and arrested Hull and Sarah. During interrogation, Sarah said this: "On October 24th, Hull and I went on an outing with family and returned very late. It was around 11 p.m. when we got home. I still hadn't had enough fun, so I went out for a walk again shortly after. When I returned from my walk, I found the house in chaos. Hull was bent over, wrapping someone on the floor in a blanket. The person wasn't moving. I could vaguely see it was the shape of my female roommate. The floor was wet, as if thick paint had been spilled. Smelling the faint scent of blood in the air, I suddenly realized something. I stood there, stunned, unable to speak, too nervous to even move. At that moment, Hull saw me. He stopped what he was doing. A thought appeared in my mind. I am the only witness. He is definitely going to kill me."
I remember hearing a voice inside my head. It was the only time I've ever heard this voice, and it was my own voice, and very clearly said, "Oh, I'm about to die."
And the murder weapon. I had just seen that gun today. No, we just bought it. Just this morning, Hull drove me to a nearby Walmart. Once we got there, Hull went straight to the weapons section and picked out a 12-gauge shotgun and ammunition, and also grabbed a soda and condoms. Because he had multiple criminal records, he wasn't eligible to buy a gun, so I had to be the one to pay for it. Thankfully, Hull didn't think of silencing me. He explained that he had argued with his roommates over money. A fight broke out, and he accidentally shot and killed them. He also asked me to help clean up the scene. Clearly, he considered me one of his own. I don't know if it was because of love and loyalty, or because of fear and stupidity. But in any case, I didn't call the police and chose to help him. Afterward, we drove the truck under the cover of night and dumped the roommates' bodies in a dumpster several blocks away. The next day, the 25th, I went to work as usual. Hull stayed home to clean the bloodstains. On the 26th, the day the police came to search the house, Hull took me to Noblesville to return his friend's pickup truck, and we stayed overnight at the friend's house. He even thought he was being clever by burning several blood-stained items of clothing at his friend's house, intending to frame his friend. And the police did indeed find a pair of pants stained with the two victims, blood at the friend's house. After hearing Sarah's story, let's look at Hull's. When questioned by the police, he claimed to know nothing and refused to plead guilty.
And they're accusing me of this crime, and I didn't do it. I honestly didn't do it. If I did do it, I would say that I...
But the police listed several key pieces of evidence. On the evening of October 23rd, the night before the murders, Hull borrowed a friend's pickup truck. According to DNA analysis, the male victim's blood was present in the truck. Hours before the victims' deaths, Hull and his girlfriend Sarah went to Walmart and purchased a weapon. Seeing this physical evidence, Hull, who had been playing dumb, finally confessed. He hadn't expected them to investigate so quickly, so he confessed the truth. He said it started because his sister owed his roommate Andrew money. The two argued over it, and Andrew happened to know he had just bought a gun. He tried to grab it and threatened to kill Hull's entire family. In the struggle, he accidentally fired the gun, causing the deaths. Afterward, thinking he should eliminate the witness, he killed the roommate's wife as well. In that case, Hull was the shooter, and Sarah's crime was not as severe. Next would just be the trial process. They'd be sentenced, and it would be over. But with the progress bar only halfway, things were clearly not that simple. While awaiting trial, Sarah and Hull were detained in the Marion County Jail. Here, communication between inmates was restricted, but it said Sarah had a friend outside the jail helping, so the two could secretly communicate via letters. But this loophole was discovered in July 2001 by Detective Kenneth. So he cut off their contact and confiscated all the letters found during a search of Hull's cell. 2 months later, the case took a major turn. Hull's lawyer found Detective Kenneth and gave him a letter claiming it had been missed. It was allegedly written by Sarah to Hull on May 16th. In the letter, Sarah seemed to admit the murder was her idea. Let's look at this letter. I wish I could go back and change what happened that night. Drew was being so mean that night. I just lost control. I didn't mean to kill them. Judging from the letter, it seemed there was indeed another side to the story. Reading on. When you said you would take the blame, I knew you loved me so deeply. At first, I thought you would talk, but you kept your promise. At the end of the letter, there was also a love taboo. This letter was undoubtedly a bombshell, directly shifting the primary suspicion for the murder to Sarah. This led prosecutor Larry Sells to suspect Sarah was the mastermind. Furthermore, a document examiner certified that this letter was indeed written by Sarah. Adding Sarah's actions of buying the gun and helping dispose of the bodies, Sells strongly urged the court to convict her of serious felonies. Sells even called Sarah a female Charles Manson. Charles Manson was a cult leader active in the U.S. In California during the 1960s and 70s. He spread extremist ideology, gathered a group of fanatical followers, and orchestrated multiple criminal incidents. The depravity of his crimes caused a sensation at the time. The female Charles Manson label was stuck on Sarah, instantly making her infamous. Everyone called her the most manipulative woman. With this uproar, Sarah was naturally strongly dissatisfied. Her defense attorney insisted the letter was forged by Hull's side, simply to shift the blame. Sarah, a physically weak woman, how could she have the ability to plot a murder? The lawyer even analyzed Hull's motive for the crime. It was that the couple was preparing for a big deal and didn't include him. He held a grudge and killed them. Although Sarah's lawyer's argument was coherent, he couldn't produce any substantial evidence. But Hull's lawyer was different. Besides the letter, there was also testimony from an inmate named Floyd Pennington. Floyd was a habitual offender. He was in jail for theft, illegal possession of a weapon, and other charges. This time, due to a robbery case, he was also in custody awaiting trial. Previously, besides writing letters to Hull, Sarah had also made a pen pal in jail. And this pen pal was Floyd. It said he and Sarah had an ambiguous relationship around the time Hull's lawyer submitted the letter. On September 28th, Floyd claimed that 6 days earlier, he and Sarah had faked illness to meet secretly at the infirmary. During the meeting, Sarah allegedly confessed to planning the murder. She was at the scene and coerced Hull into committing the act. Even though 11 days later, Floyd would be sentenced for robbery, his testimony was still accepted by the court. On August 22, 2002, because of the witness and that key letter, Sarah was found responsible for the double homicide and sentenced to 110 years in prison. As for Hull, the shooter, his defense lawyer claimed he was manipulated by Sarah. With the letter as corroborating evidence, the court found this reasonable and only sentenced him to 75 years in prison. The person who pulled the trigger received 35 fewer years than the suspected mastermind. This extremely contradictory and controversial result caused an explosion in public opinion. At this time, people began to question the letter that had appeared out of thin air and played a key role. They pointed out many suspicious points. First, Detective Kenneth had confiscated all of Hull's letters in July and cut off their subsequent contact. But this letter suddenly appeared 2 months later. It's hard not to suspect that something fishy was going on. Second, of the 80 letters Sarah sent to Hull, almost all were handwritten, but this specific one was typed out. And no corresponding handwritten draft or corresponding envelope could be found. Therefore, many people doubted its authenticity. The authorities also launched an investigation. As time went on, more and more evidence surfaced. In a 2003 deposition, Hull finally admitted that he had an inmate named Steve Logan forge the letter. While awaiting trial in the Marion County Jail, he showed Logan Sarah's handwriting and asked him to write a letter copying the handwriting. In return, Hull would protect him. The police later did indeed find no Sarah's fingerprints on the letter. Instead, there were fingerprints from Hull and Logan, but Logan denied writing such a letter. He said Hull did approach him and show him Sarah's handwriting, asking him to help forge a letter, but he did not agree. However, a private investigator hired by Sarah said Logan had admitted to him in person that he wrote the letter. At this point in the investigation, the court seemed to realize its mistake. So on May 4, 2004, on the grounds of fabricating false evidence, it resentenced Hull to 90 years. But strangely, even though Hull was resentenced, Sarah's 110-year term remained unchanged. Perhaps the court believed that although the letter was fake, the contents of the letter were true. In 2008, Detective Kenneth, who was in charge of Sarah's case, was embroiled in a huge scandal. In a case he was responsible for, the suspect skipped bail and fled. Although the person was later found, the evidence was lost, and the police could not press charges. Everyone suspected Kenneth was behind it, because he was romantically involved with the suspect's niece. But Kenneth insisted it was all a frame-up. He resigned in anger. That same year, Sarah, locked up in prison, made a big move, which made her instantly notorious. If the female Charles Manson title and the controversial verdict were Sarah's debut, then this event was her breakout that shocked the nation. After the verdict, Sarah was incarcerated at the Marion County Jail and Rockville Correctional Facility. Her sentence was 110 years. Getting out alive was basically impossible, and Sarah had always maintained her innocence. To reclaim her justice, she appealed multiple times but never succeeded. In April 2007, she tried to file a habeas corpus petition, hoping the court would pay attention to her, in case her case could be overturned or her sentence reduced. Unfortunately, after waiting over a year, the petition was rejected. At this point, she understood she had exhausted all options and had reached a dead end. So, a bold idea sprouted in her mind: escape. But escaping prison is certainly not a simple task. She knew she had no special skills. Her only advantage was that, as a woman, she was reasonably attractive. She used this to her full advantage and successfully persuaded a married prison guard with the family, Scott Spittler. Just like that, she had an inside man. Next, she contacted friends on the outside. Several of them partnered to sell contraband to earn money. Through this, she saved up the startup capital for her escape. Once she had money, she went to guard Scott and said, "I'll give you $15,000. Under the influence of money and their intimate relationship, even though Scott knew Sarah's true intentions, he didn't object. After meticulous planning, on August 4th, 2008, the escape began. That day, Sarah secretly went to the prison's recreation center, took off her prison uniform, and stuffed it in the ceiling. She changed into the civilian clothes Scott gave her and walked towards the small gas station inside the prison. When no one was around, she quickly climbed into a vehicle. The driver was Scott, who was there to pick her up. She hid under the seat, and the vehicle drove out the main gate. Relying on his 5 years of experience working there, Scott gambled that no guard would check his vehicle. And in fact, that's what happened. Everything went smoothly. They escaped the prison in broad daylight. They arrived at a parking lot. At this time, a woman named Jamie Long had been waiting for a long time. She was Sarah's ex-girlfriend. The two met while serving time at the Marion County Jail and formed a deep bond. After Jamie was released, she frequently visited Sarah in prison. She even considered Sarah her wife. So when she learned Sarah was escaping, she immediately offered to help. After Jamie picked up her wife Sarah, she immediately drove her to Indianapolis to hide. This entire escape involved no major commotion or violence. It was completed very easily. It wasn't until the prison head count that evening that the guards discovered Sarah was missing. The prison immediately raised the security level to maximum and began a sweep for her. But by this time, Sarah was already hundreds of kilometers away. Of course, as Indiana's largest women's prison, The prison officials were no slouches. They checked surveillance footage and guard logs, found that Sarah walked to the gas station and then disappeared. Only 3 vehicles were there at the time, one of which belonged to guard Scott. He was arrested the next day, and the interrogation went smoothly. He confessed immediately. He not only confessed his intimate relationship with Sarah, but also ratted out the getaway driver, Jamie Long. In the end, he was sentenced to 8 years in prison. The driver, Jamie Long, was also quickly arrested for assisting Sarah's escape. She was sentenced to 7 years in prison, although the 2 accomplices were caught. The police still had no leads on the main fugitive, Sarah. To capture Sarah as soon as possible, the police issued a nationwide wanted poster. In September, a TV program called America's Most Wanted did a special report on Sarah. Keep in mind, past escapees were almost all men. Women who successfully escaped were extremely rare, so this kind of story always attracts extra attention. Plus, this program already had high ratings. So as if overnight, the name Sarah Pender became known to everyone in America. In October, Sarah was listed as one of the U.S. Marshal Service's 15 most wanted fugitives. But Sarah seemed very good at hiding. She remained undiscovered until December 22nd. Chicago police received a call. The caller claimed Sarah was living near his home. Police immediately mobilized and, with surprising ease, recaptured Sarah in an apartment on Chicago's North Side. At the time, she was using the alias Ashley Thompson and was working at a construction company. After the escape incident, the prison naturally gave her special attention from her recapture until January 2014. For a total of 870 days at the Indiana Women's Prison, Sarah was kept in solitary confinement. No visitation, no communication. She spent nearly 23 hours a day in her cell. During her incarceration, media reports about Sarah never stopped. However, they used words like cunning, dangerous, evil, and the most manipulative woman to describe her. Her story was also adapted into books and movies. It seems the case could really end here. But, to everyone's surprise, there was another 180-degree turn. The prosecutor who had convicted Sarah Sells made an astonishing discovery. A list written by that former witness, Sarah's pen pal Floyd. The list contained information on 18 criminals. Sarah was among them. It also said, "I will help buy things, plant bugs, and do anything I can to go against these criminals." This list indicated that Floyd, for some benefit, was willing to testify against anyone. Upon investigation, he had indeed served as a witness more than once. Therefore, the credibility of his original testimony was extremely low. However, during the trial, this list was not presented in court. If this list had been made public back then, Floyd's testimony would very likely have been declared invalid. Prosecutor Sells began to realize there might be more to the case. He stated, "If I had known earlier, I would never have put him on the witness stand." Sarah and her lawyer, seeing another reversal, planned to try again to get a sentence reduction. They failed very smoothly. No one knows the reason why. Sarah remained infamous. In a 2013 documentary, a prison guard still evaluated her this way.
Sarah is one of the best manipulators I've seen.
If you can convince that person to drive you out of a correctional facility, you can convince anybody to do anything.
In January 2018, Sarah was transferred back to Rockville Correctional Facility. It's reported she will be eligible for parole in 2054. She will be 75 years old by then. The following year, Steve Logan formally confessed. He admitted to forging the letter that framed Sarah. This is his signed affidavit. "I believe I was coerced, manipulated, and pressured into writing this letter. I deeply regret my stupidity." At this point, the key evidence that convicted Sarah was fake, and the key witness was problematic. All of this indicated that Sarah's conviction was likely a miscarriage of justice, so much so that Sells, after retiring, is still trying to atone for his mistake.
Focus away from the prosecutor's office and my responsibilities there, I realized that there's no way that she should have been convicted of the murders.
He once contacted Sarah's family, promising to help Sarah fight for her release. Around 2020, Sarah's sister started an online petition hoping to use the power of the masses to help Sarah get out of prison sooner. The famous Georgetown University even included her case in a course project. called Overturning Wrongful Convictions. Many students joined to try to help Sarah clear her name. In prison, Sarah also gave an interview to a local TV station.
Knowing what you know now, would you go back and do it all over again?
If I had the mind frame then that I have now, absolutely not. I escaped because I ran out of hope. And when you lose hope, desperation follows.
Those 4.5 months that you were on the run, what was that like for you?
It was beautiful.
If things go well, she might, in the near future, return to the normal life she has long yearned for. Today, Sarah is still serving her sentence at Rockville Correctional Facility, but more and more people are supporting her. Her life seems to have a glimmer of hope. Okay, that's all for today's story. Please give a like, share, and subscribe to support us. Your small gesture is a great encouragement to me. I'm DarkCaseX. See you next time.